Well, joining me now from Tucson, Arizona, is the president of the Survivors Network of Those Abused by Priests, Tim Lennon. From Rome, we have Father Robert Gahl, and in Melbourne, Australia, is Judy Courtin, a lawyer who specializes in institutionalized sexual abuse. Thanks all so much for joining us on this panel. Tim, I would like to start with you. I know it's been a very slow and painful process, but are you at least encouraged by this development, the fact that Cardinal Pell will now stand trial?
Well, we're always in favor of civil society investigating crimes against sexual violence against children. So when the state institutions or civil institutions take seriously and aggressively prosecute those that would harm children, we support that and honor all investigations.
But is it bittersweet, in a sense, Tim, that it did take this long to get here?
Well, there's still more work to be done. 3/4 of all victims of child sexual abuse never step forward. So only a small percentage of those ever come to any kind of civil or criminal resolution. So the tragedy is we call ourselves survivors because so many victims of child sex abuse suffer from drug addiction, suicide, all these different kinds of emotional and psychological problems. They're so beset that it's difficult for them to step forward.
Understood. Judy, as somebody who works as an attorney in this space, I mean, how big of a step do you think it is that Australia has taken by finally bringing Cardinal Pell to trial? I think you said at one point that it might actually ensure justice for victims in the future.
Well, this takes us back to my area of research. I did my doctoral research in law looking at sexual assault in the Catholic Church, whether or not victims are finding justice. And I think we need to go right back to the very basics, and that is, what is justice for victims and survivors? And justice is, there are multiple elements, but two of the most important elements for justice one is for the truth to be told and acknowledged, and for there to be a two-way exchange of the truth. So survivors and victims and their families want their truth to be known and acknowledged. Equally, they want to hear the truth from the church as well. As important as that is the fact that victims and survivors also want accountability. Now, accountability, we look at both criminal accountability, and that's accountability for the sex crimes themselves, but equally important, in fact, more important for a lot of the people in my research, is accountability of the hierarchy who concealed and covered up the crimes. Now, in Australia...
No, sorry, Judy, I'd like to give everybody equal time, but I'm going to get back to you on some of the issues you brought up. But let me ask Father Gahl, I mean, what you think of what Judy said. Is the Catholic Church ready to adhere to the requirements that she laid out as an attorney? And how is the Church feeling right now to have one of its highest ranking members actually face trial like this?
Oh, absolutely. The Church is in full agreement with those principles that Judy said. In fact, very beautifully spoken about the need for truth and how helpful the truth can be in helping to remedy in some way the injustice, the terrible injustice that those who suffered this abuse went through. And in fact, this is exactly the same thing that Cardinal Pell himself is seeking. He too is seeking the truth, and he was anxious to go and to face this trial, and he's anxious to give his testimony. In fact, he nearly shouted out, not guilty, at the beginning of these recent procedures, which have been ongoing in his case, that there have been so many procedures against him, and at every turn he's been found to be not guilty. In fact, it's an amazing, just looking at it from a historical perspective, Cardinal Pell was the first bishop in the world who established some really sound and thorough criteria for handling the allegations of sexual abuse on the part of clergy when he was made Archbishop of Melbourne. And shortly thereafter, this was in 2001, he established those principles in 1996. In 2001, he was moved, really promoted to the See of Sydney in Australia. And very quickly, there were allegations against him personally. And he's, I think, the first archbishop in history who stepped down in order to himself undergo the proceedings by an independent investigator regarding those allegations. So he's been, in a sense, under trial since 2001 through these same procedures that he himself established, hopefully leading to the truth.
Okay, so he does claim he's innocent, as you've stated there, Cardinal Pell does. And it seems as if you respect him for his eagerness to prove that innocence. But then why isn't the Catholic Church better coming to his defense? The Catholic Church is not contributing, particularly financially, to the defense of Cardinal Pell. Why not?
In fact, this is really beautiful, and I think in terms of the honorability of the Church with respect to transparency and accountability, the Church is saying that this is not an institutional accusation against the Church as such. It's against him personally, and he has his own personal responsibility. And the Church is also saying we respect civil justice, and we want him to go to trial. We want to see the proceedings be laid out transparently according to accountability and those principles of a democratic constitutional order. And we want this to play out. And the Church is purposely not interfering in any way. Pope Francis is very careful to not even to express his support of Cardinal Pell. He surely supports him. He appointed him to his Council of 9 Cardinals that have this international purview over the Universal Church before these allegations arose. And yet he hasn't spoken in his defense because he wants to respect these legal proceedings.
Okay, Tim, go ahead. Do you agree that the Church has been an honest broker then here?
No. In 2014, the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child had a hearing with the Catholic Church, with the Vatican, about their systematic and historic cover-ups of child sex abuse. That was in 2014. We still have not heard a response from the Vatican to the UN Committee on the Rights of a Child 3 years later. And the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child says that, yes, there was systematic cover-ups and moving priests around. And so to me, that the whole issue of saying that the Vatican wants to be transparent, I think it is totally wrong. You have Archbishop Operon, if I'm pronouncing his name right, from Guam, who recently had a Vatican trial of sorts, and they didn't remove him from clergy. They didn't even acknowledge that he had 4 accusations of sexual abuse. And so to me, there's still a systematic effort to keep things quiet about sexual abuse within clergy. And the Pope has yet to kick out one bishop who has sexually abused a child or accusations of it, or covered up sexual abuse. And when the Pope starts removing bishops, then I would say that they're open and transparent.
Okay, Judy, let me ask you. I mean, do you think the Church has played an honorable role in Cardinal Pell's case, or do you agree with Tim that there's, a little too little transparency, actually?
Look, I want to, yes, I definitely comment on that. I want to respond to Father Gahl's opinion or comment that Cardinal Pell was the first archbishop in the world to take child sexual abuse seriously in the Church. Now, that's just not true. Cardinal Pell, in 1996, when he became archbishop, before he was a cardinal, he did start up an internal complaints process for complaints of allegations of child abuse. Now, that complaints process, which was very much part of my research, in fact, what the research found, and what our Royal Commission, which has run for 5 years, has also found, is that internal complaints process was in fact designed by lawyers to be very legalistic and to further silence, contain and control the victims. Now, only recently, we're getting some very important legislative reform to allow survivor victims to be able to sue the Church. But up until the last couple of years, in Australia, there was no legal entity for the Catholic Church per se that victims and survivors could sue. So
Okay.
basically, they had to go back to the church with cap in hand and beg. And the Royal Commission, which I said has been going for 5 years with 6 Royal Commissioners, and my research all show that cover-up and concealment of the sex crimes is universal and shocking. And in Australia, we do not have one conviction for the crime of concealment and cover-up.
Okay.
Not one. We have an Archbishop who's on trial at the moment, but that's it.
Okay.
Now, that really is quite extraordinary when you think about the number of victims, thousands in Australia, thousands, and the number of people who have covered up and concealed.
So, Father Gahl, I mean, you feel the church has really made progress and has been transparent in this process, but we're hearing the opposite from both the victims and the attorneys that work so closely on these cases. Where does that leave you?
Well, of course, there is room for progress, and it's one of the reasons why Pope Francis was elected, why he was chosen, was to bring reform to the church. It's one of the reasons why he brought Cardinal Pell to the Vatican, was to assist in this reform and this accountability and transparency, also regarding economic affairs within the Vatican. And when I said that Cardinal Pell established those rules for addressing clerical sexual abuse in 1996, I said that he was the first among bishops throughout the world. And of course, there are civil procedures in place that need to also be engaged, which is exactly why he's facing trial right now. And Judy brought up the issue of Archbishop Apuron, the fact that he has already been tried and convicted in the Vatican regarding crimes that the statute of limitations have already run out back in his home country of Guam, indicates that the Vatican has more severe procedures than many states do, many civil jurisdictions. And right now, Judy rightly said, he has not been removed from the clerical state, and this is because he has asked for an appeal. And the church is respecting due process, and there's a right to appeal, and that's undergoing right now.
Unfortunately, Father Robert Gahl, I'm going to have to give you the last word. We are completely out of time for this segment, but there's unfortunately so much more to discuss. But we'll look forward to see how the trial develops, and thank you all three so much for joining us on the Newsmakers.